The Pride Within. Chapter 1. The first thing Leo remembered was the sound of the wind. It wasn't just a breeze, it was a song, a language that rolled through the tall savanna grass, whispering secrets to anyone who could listen. He had been a toddler then, barely old enough to understand words, yet he understood the wind. It told him when danger was near. It told him where the world ended and where it began. He didn't remember his parents. Sometimes in the quiet moments between sleep and waking, he thought he could hear a woman's voice. It was soft, lilting, and full of warmth. But the voice always faded, replaced by the low growl of the lioness who had become his mother. She had found him, a small, crying thing, wrapped in the wreckage of a shattered jeep. He was too young to know what had happened, how the vehicle had veered off a dirt road during a storm, how the adults inside had screamed before the world went silent. But when the lioness approached, her golden eyes gleaming in the rain, she had not killed him. Instead, she nudged him with her nose, her breath hot and damp against his skin, and carried him away. The pride accepted him in their way. The lioness fed him, shared her kills, and kept him close to her side. The others tolerated him, though they often watched him with a wary curiosity. He learned to crawl alongside the cubs, to mimic their movements, to understand their growls and snarls. By the time he could walk, he could run like a predator, silent and swift. But Leo was not a lion. He knew this even then. His skin burned under the sun, his hands ached when he climbed trees, and his teeth were not sharp enough to tear flesh from bone. He was weaker, slower, and more fragile than his adopted family. Yet he survived. He learned to hunt, to crouch low in the grass and wait for the perfect moment to strike. He learned to eat quickly, before the hyenas came. He learned the brutal, unspoken rules of the wild: kill or be killed, take only what you need, and never show fear. Years passed. The boy in the grass grew taller, leaner, his muscles honed by a life of constant movement. His hair was long and tangled, his skin scarred from 100 small battles. His eyes, once soft and wide, had hardened into something sharp and predatory. He no longer cried at night, no longer dreamed of voices he couldn't remember. The lions were his family, and the savanna was his home. But the wind, his first teacher, began to change. It carried new scents, strange and foreign: sweat, smoke, metal. He didn't know what they meant, but they made his stomach twist with unease. The lions sensed it too. They grew restless, their growls low and uncertain. Then came the day the humans arrived. They found him near a watering hole, crouched beside a gazelle carcass. He had been too hungry to notice the sound of their boots crunching through the grass, the low murmur of their voices. By the time he looked up, it was too late. There were 3 of them, dressed in khaki and armed with rifles. For a moment they froze, staring at the wild, feral boy who stared back at them. His face was smeared with blood, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. He looked more animal than human. One of them, a woman with dark curly hair, lowered her rifle. "It's a child," she whispered. The others didn't move. Their eyes darted to the lions, who were watching from a distance, their tails flicking in agitation. The pride had not attacked, but they were tense, their bodies coiled like springs. The woman stepped closer, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "It's okay," she said softly. "We're not here to hurt you." Leo didn't understand her words, but he understood her tone. It was calm, soothing, like the wind on a quiet evening. Still, he didn't trust her. He bared his teeth, a low growl rumbling in his throat. The woman stopped. She crouched down, making herself smaller, less threatening. "You don't have to be afraid," she said. "We're going to help you." Help. The word meant nothing to him. But the lions were restless now, pacing back and forth. The lioness, the one who had raised him, let out a sharp, commanding roar. It was a warning, a final cry that echoed across the savanna. Before Leo could react, the men moved. They lunged forward, grabbing him by the arms, pulling him away from the carcass. He thrashed and kicked, his growls turning into screams. The lions roared, but they didn't attack. They couldn't. The humans had fire, loud and deadly, and the lions knew better than to challenge them. "Hold him still," one of the men shouted. Leo's heart raced. He called out to the lions, his voice raw and desperate. But they didn't come. The lioness watched with sorrow in her eyes as the humans dragged him away. "For the first time in years," Leo cried. They took him to a place with walls. There were no stars, no wind, no grass beneath his feet. The air smelled of chemicals and metal, and the food they gave him was soft and tasteless. He hated it. He hated them. But the woman, the one with the dark hair, was kind. She stayed with him, speaking in a language he didn't understand, her voice gentle and patient. She brought him books with pictures, showed him how to hold a spoon, how to wear clothes. She called him Leo, and though he didn't know what it meant, he began to respond to it. Months passed. He learned to speak, though his words were slow and halting. He learned to walk upright, to sit at a table, to sleep in a bed. But he never felt at home. The walls were a cage, the people strangers. At night he dreamed of the savanna, of the lions' warm bodies pressed against his, of the wind singing him to sleep. One day, the woman took him outside. It wasn't the savanna, it was a park with trimmed grass and neat rows of trees, but it was open and the sun was warm on his skin. For the first time since he had been taken, he felt something like hope. The wind was different here, softer and less wild, but it still spoke to him. It told him that his old life was gone, but a new one was waiting. He just had to survive. End of chapter 1.